Let us now pray. O Almighty God, as we have come together to begin our meeting of the Assembly, we humbly beseech you to grant to all our members the light and guidance of your Holy Spirit, that we may wisely take counsel together and come to such decisions as shall promote your glory and the well-being of all our citizens in this our land, so that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be enjoyed by all people. Grant this for the sake of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. You may be seated.
Oath of allegiance of a new member. Announcements by the presiding officer. Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet. Assembly laws brought back from Parliament. Petitions, papers, presentation of reports from Dispute Resolution Commission or select committees, Chief Secretary's questions to secretaries, request for leave to move the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by secretaries or assistant secretaries, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the Assembly and moved by a secretary or assistant secretary, public business, executive business, motion.
Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer. Be it resolved that this House approve the draft estimates of revenue and expenditure respecting all functions of the Tobago House of Assembly for the financial year October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024, copies of which were laid on the table at an earlier stage of the proceedings. Thank you.
Proposed is, be it resolved that this House approve the draft estimates of revenue and expenditure respecting all functions of the Tobago House of Assembly for the financial year October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024, copies of which were laid on the table at an earlier stage of the proceedings. Members, before we go on this morning, please be guided by the standing orders. When a member is on his feet presenting, please do not disturb unless you stand on a point of order. Minority Leader, you may join the debate.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Deputy Presiding Officer, Chief Secretary, Secretaries and Assistant Secretaries, my colleague, Minority Councillor, administrators of the Tobago House of Assembly, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the viewing and listening public, members of the media, good morning. Deputy Presiding Officer, I stand here, a son of a daily rated father and a housewife, mother. Like many hundreds of Tobagonians, like many of us here in this distinguished august chamber, I can proudly declare that my dreams have become a reality through the policies and the programs of the People's National Movement. Deputy Presiding Officer, there is an old Tobagonian saying, when green leaf fall in a water, it do rotten same time. The gist of that saying, Deputy Presiding Officer, is that you often do not see the effects of a decision until much later. And by that time, there is little you could do to stave off the effects of that decision. The glistening green leaf, admired as it floated on the water, bobbing and rising with each splash of the water, once exposed to the elements and away from its life source, begins to die and soon sinks to the river bottom, rotten, useless, and soggy. Deputy Presiding Officer, I could not help but reflect on this piece of wisdom handed down from the elders as I sat in this chamber on Monday, utterly and bitterly disappointed at how this green leaf of a political party that had promised so much to the people of Tobago, that had proffered a new vision to the people of Tobago, had lost its shine and was plummeting to the bottom of the Tobago River, perhaps in Argyll or Castara, dragging with them the hopes and ambitions of every Tobagonian who months ago. Deputy Presiding Officer, like so many of the previous statements coming from the Chief Secretary, the budget presented was at best disingenuous and at worst another huge con job foisting upon the people of this island. And it drew my mind to another old adage, drummed into our heads as students of bishops, that to whom much is given, much is expected. Deputy Presiding Officer, the people of Tobago gave this administration a whole lot, and therefore they expected much. Instead, it was a budget that was conspicuous in its lack of creativity and detail, filled with the rhetoric that could only come from empty vessels. So lacking in substance was this budget, Deputy Presiding Officer, that even those who fed Tobagonians the saltfish of hope and newness in this PDP administration, the likes of Dr. Vanos James and Martin George, are now distancing themselves from its stench, just stopping short of offering their mea culpa to the population for the egregious sin they have committed. Deputy Presiding Officer, it would have been best if the Chief Secretary had adopted the same style of his recent pre-recorded broadcast and simply sent us the video of him speaking with the talking heads of secretaries simply bobbing behind in the darkened background, afraid to stand in the light of truth and righteousness. At least we would have then had the opportunity to turn down the volume and engage in something more profitable for 3 hours and 30 minutes that he spoke, like sweeping our yards or even washing our clothes. Deputy Presiding Officer, I stand here this morning, 4 days later, still flabbergasted at Farley's flight of fantasy. Last year, after hearing
the calling of names addressed by office. Thanks.
At the Chief Secretary's flight of fantasy. Last year, after hearing the budget presentation, I opined that the budget was inter alia vacuous, superfluous, and vexatious. My initial reaction to this year's presentation was that the budget was disappointing and disingenuous. That was my initial reaction. But you know what, Deputy Presiding Officer? After carefully perusing the budget documents, I have adjusted my initial position. For the record, this budget is a mismatch of failed ideas, a hodgepodge of hit and hope thinking, and a demoralizing defense of a failed administration. According to Ms. Flora from Darrell Spring, one of my residents, a thing like this does make Christian cuss. Rest assured, Deputy Presiding Officer, I have no intention of taking that route. Instead, Deputy Presiding Officer, on behalf of the people of Tobago, in their allotted time to me, I'll present a response to the Chief Secretary's budget that will be reflective in parts and forward-thinking in others. My response will be one rooted in facts, stubborn as they may be, and will demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt, Deputy Presiding Officer, not only the veracity of the words of the country's first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams, that the alternative to the PNM is chaos, but that a PNM administration remains the only hope for a resilient Tobago, a resurgent Tobago, a rejuvenated Tobago, and above all, a ready Tobago. Before going further though, Deputy Presiding Officer, I wish to place on the public record my sincerest appreciation for the hard-working and dedicated staff and dedication of the staff of the Office of the Minority Leader. And I pause because up till last night we worked until 3 a.m. and these are staff that has not been paid by this wicked administration for 2 months, but they continue to come to work earnestly, diligently, and providing productive service, even in the face of the financial tribulations they are being put upon them by this heinous administration. But not only am I thankful to my staff, I'm also appreciative for the subject matter experts who contributed to this presentation. The constituents of Darrell Spring Wim, of which one is in the gallery this morning, for their continued faith in me and the PNM, and the thousands of Tobagonians whose ideas and ambitions, whose voices will be heard through me today. Madam Presiding Officer, Deputy Presiding Officer, while the Trinidad and Tobago has become known in the international circles for punching way above its weight, the national economy was not left unscathed by several overlapping global economic challenges over the past 2 decades. Indeed, Trinidad and Tobago's economy was hit by multiple adverse shocks over the past decade, including the 2014 collapse in global energy prices, disruptions to domestic energy production, example, maintenance and logistic issues, and of course, the dreaded 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. Within recent times, however, Deputy Presiding Officer, the country has seen some silver lining behind the dark clouds of the economic shocks, and the green shoots of recovery have begun to appear. As reported on the IMF website, 5th May of 2023, from the IMF Article 4 consultation with Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago's economic activity is recovering, supported by high global energy prices. The IMF cautions, however, that in the medium term, the outlook for global energy prices remains volatile and highly uncertain, particularly as climate change accelerates the global energy transition away from fossil fuel, end quote. The IMF also recently pointed to the turnaround of the economy and lauded the prudent management by the PNM administration in overcoming the economic mismanagement of their UNC friends during the 2010 to 2015 period, as well as overcoming the decline in government revenues from early 2015 consequent on the declining oil and gas revenues. You may recall, Deputy Presiding Officer, oil prices declined to as low as $50 per barrel and natural gas to $2.45 per MMBTU, respectively. Several organizations, including the IMF and the World Health Organization, have also lauded this country's management of the COVID-19 crisis, which placed the country on a sound economic footing. This level of astute management also occurred in Tobago under the PNM administration that crucial period of 2019 to 2021. Conservative estimates suggested an economic decline of approximately 15% in 2020, with the economy rebounding in 2021. The records show, Deputy Presiding Officer, that owing to the COVID recovery socio-economic measures implemented by the PNM administration during that period, the negative effects of the pandemic were ameliorated. The economic decline was only 7%, and the economy rebounded in 2021 and grew by 4%. Let me repeat that. The economy rebounded in 2021 and grew by 4%. Deputy Presiding Officer, what needs to be said positively and forcefully, or rather, more positively and more forcefully, is the fact that the People's National Movement administration successfully navigated the Tobago economy through the pandemic to a state of recovery beginning in 2021, when the GDP of Tobago grew by 4.2%. Madam Presiding Officer, it is no secret that the global economic challenges had a significant trickle-down impact on Tobago's economy. That's no secret. As any good student of economics knows, any shocks that impact the central government's revenue stream will invariably affect Tobago's economic circumstances, and by extension, the lives of the people of Tobago. One can accept we have little control over unforeseen circumstances and global political scenarios. But the truth of the matter is that what has been ailing Tobago and its citizens at this time is the mismanagement of the island's resources by an ill-prepared and poorly governed administration. Deputy Presiding Officer, this is what one of our renowned economists, Dr. Vanos James, several key things about the 2023 THA budget. One of them is that it reads like a fairy tale, if not a tall tale, with no links to data that represents the true state of the Tobago economy. Last year, I pointed out the deficiency. This year, things seem to have gone further downhill, with the key facts ignored altogether. Words of Dr. Vanos James, a man who all the members on the opposite side, they are quite familiar. Lies, half-truths, innuendos, and with good governance. But alas, these seem to be the watchwords of the current administration. Deputy Presiding Officer, I will return to this matter later in my presentation. Deputy Presiding Officer, I would like to place on record that year on year, Tobago's economy declined by 2%. Construction and quarrying declined by a mammoth 34.7%. Finance and real estate declined by 5.1%. And the agricultural sector declined by 9.5%, whilst the manufacturing sector declined by an alarming 16.2%. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Chief Secretary in his delivery of the budget presentation on Monday refused an alarming 2% in 2022 when compared to 2021. Who was there in most of 2021, even under 6.6, the PNM? And who came in after the PNM? The PDP, TPP, somebody, independence. And during that year, on their watch on that side, the economy of Tobago declined by 2%. So you moved from a 4% increase to a 2% increase. So in essence, you really had a 6% decline in the Tobago economy under these incompetent jokers. Deputy Presiding Officer, forgot to mention that 2% decline. But let me repeat, Deputy Presiding Officer, Tobago's economy, and I want that to sink in to all right-thinking Tobagonians, that while they might bray and ray, your economy declined by 2% on the watch of the Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy. What is even more alarming is that this administration had an increase in allocation of over $300 million in fiscal 2021. This, as far as I can recall, has been the highest allocation of any Tobago House of Assembly administration. Yet, on the watch of this Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance, we had a decline in quarrying and construction, decline in agriculture, decline in finance and real estate, manufacturing, and an overall decline of 2%. Deputy Presiding Officer, we ought not to take a candle to see in the light what is invisible and plain sight during the day. The harsh and unpalatable truth is that the recent performance of the Tobago economy, as reflected by the readily available data on the economic decline year on year, is of grave concern for all sober-minded Tobagonians. Deputy Presiding Officer, our concerns are legitimate, as we have seen a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, troubling profligacy, the absence of an overarching economic development framework which guides the expenditure of Tobago's scarce financial resources and ensures adherence to the basic rules of procurement for major capital expenditure. This is contrary to good governance principles and further erodes confidence both in the Tobago economy and the Tobago House of Assembly as a whole. Deputy Presiding Officer, the evidence of this fiscal imprudence has resulted in tremendous embarrassment to suppliers of goods and services to the Tobago House of Assembly, who have had their THA issue checks rejected by the island's financial institutions. What is even more disconcerting is that in multiple cases, not even purchase orders are being honored, as they are not even worth the paper on which they are printed. What a state. In other words, Deputy Presiding Officer, the checks have rubber in them. They are bouncing up and down the place like sponge balls, while the purchase orders are of no value. In all of this, the nonsensical excuses coming from the Chief Secretary and the Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy, as well as his advisors, just will not do. Deputy Presiding Officer, I wish to remind the Chief Secretary and his band of secretaries that it is an offense in law to issue a check knowing it to be unencashable. It is an offense in law to issue a check knowing it to be unencashable. Deputy Presiding Officer, I go a step further, albeit cautiously, to say to my former schoolmate that a supply of goods and services asking repeatedly and forcefully for monies legitimately owed to him or her is not a threat, but a legitimate request. And if he's unafraid of the consequences, as he says he is, I challenge him to make the audit report public. Make the audit report public. That is Tobagonians' money, spending on Tobagonians' business. And the Chief Secretary ought to level with the people of Tobago. Tobagonians want to know. That is their money, not yours. The audit does not belong to you. It belongs to the people of Tobago. It's them who pay for it. When you could afford audit on your own, you could hold your audit. But this is Tobago's people audit and they deserve to see it. Deputy Presiding Officer, not unexpectedly, the plan of this administration to stimulate economic activity fell woefully short of reducing the economic decline currently facing Tobago. Deputy Presiding Officer, the question is, what in the current circumstances is required to stimulate economic activity? Chief Secretary, I hope you answer in your wind-up. Members of this PDP, independent to TPP administration, were instrumental in thwarting and scuttling the Sanders project, which, according to conservative estimates, had the potential to transform the Tobago economy by creating over 2,000 jobs and providing much-needed revenue to the state and multiple millions of dollars in business to fledgling entrepreneurs in the various sectors such as agriculture, the orange economy, and our light industrial and manufacturing sectors. Deputy Presiding Officer, the presence of a Sandals on the island had the potential to increase visitor arrivals to over 150,000 in 3 years and attract airlift to Tobago as a consequence of these increased arrivals. The increased marketing of Destination Tobago, the potential for direct local expenditure of US $50 million per year, and an overall $500 million impact on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, equivalent to approximately 25% of Tobago's GDP. Or you could do with a Sandals now. 25 minus 2, that is 23% growth you would get. And this would have contributed, as I said, significantly to Tobago's economy, and I dare say, sustainable recovery. What is even more damning was the disastrous knock-on effect their actions had on at least 4 local potential investors whose business model piggybacks on the establishment of Sandals in Tobago. Claiming that the Sandals project would likely reduce the people of Tobago to being bellboys and waiters, the TPP and their supporters undermined Tobago's tourism potential, and as a result, Tobago's future. Deputy Presiding Officer, as I said in my opening, when green leaf fall in a water, and I leave it right there. Deputy Presiding Officer, I now turn my attention to what is effectively a construction desert. During his presentation on Monday, the Honorable Chief Secretary made mention of some fleeting pipe dreams for developing the orange economy and the film sector. What the Honorable Member failed to mention was that this administration is preparing the entire island to feature in the new blockbuster movie, Mad Max. And you know who Mad Max is, right? The desert. The Deputy Presiding Officer, this administration is so devoted to this project, they have converted the entire island into a construction desert. Madam Presiding Officer, I have received so many complaints and phone calls from concerned Tobagonians of abandoned and incomplete projects all around the island. As a result, I decided to take an island trip. So I started from Crown Point to Charlottesville, and I paid a closer attention to these complaints I received. Lo and behold, Deputy Presiding Officer, aside from the thousands of potholes and trenches in the road, there exists a myriad of abandoned and incomplete projects, from sidewalks to retaining walls and box drains. Deputy Presiding Officer, even in Charlottesville, the Chief Secretary's own electoral district, residents are longing to see their absentee representative to discuss the abandoned community center project. However, Deputy Presiding Officer, the problem created by this administration goes further, wider, and deeper. This administration has derailed and destroyed the indigenous construction sector on the island. Scan the island. Tobago is basically at a standstill. There are no major construction projects, barely even any minor ones, all in the name of spite, vindictiveness, and maliciousness. Deputy Presiding Officer, the evidence is clear. Any economist worth their salt will tell you that one of the biggest and best indicators of economic growth is a vibrant construction sector. Conversely, Deputy Presiding Officer, in a recession, it is one of the first to grind to a halt. According to the latest data, Deputy Presiding Officer, the construction sector in Tobago declined by a mammoth 35%. Despite the dreams of the Chief Secretary and his administration, and despite what they are peddling, the precipitous decline in the construction sector is both symptomatic and reflective of the state of Tobago's economy. A desert, completely blank, empty, nothingness. In the meantime, Deputy Presiding Officer, while the stallions and stalwarts of the Tobago construction are being starved of both contracts and payments for completed works, their friends on that side, from Trinidad, and I'm sure all you know some of the names, California Stucco Company Limited, the Roofing Company, Innovative Roofing and Construction Solutions Limited, this one hard to call, Corozal Trading Limited, Construction Services and Supplies. I don't know how they find them, where they find them. And others, they are laughing all the way to the bank with over 300 million of Tobago's development funds with no return. All that money spirited away. As a member of Scarborough Mount Grace and Secretary of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development stated previously, and I quote, by sending this money to Trinidad contractors, what this administration is in fact doing is enriching another economy. Might I add, Deputy Presiding Officer, this administration led by the member for Palutuvale Lands for Miss Speyside is enriching another economy at the peril and demise of our Tobago indigenous contractors. And you know what is hurtful? They promised the Tobago contractors, it doesn't matter how you get it, where you get it, who you did support, who you didn't support. They said Tobago is for Tobagonians. But under this administration, Tobago money is for the Trinidad financiers of this administration. What a nightmare. What a betrayal. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Chief Secretary shared with us the CSO statistics in relation to unemployment in Tobago at 1%. Whilst I agree with the Chief Secretary that the statistic requires greater analysis, it must be noted that this is an aggregate statistic. It may very well be that unemployment rate in Speyside is 1%, because as one gentleman said in the community, everywhere they go, a Speyside. You go to Roxborough, a Speyside. You go to Tongue, a Speyside people. That is what was said. So it perhaps might be very well that the only place in Tobago where the unemployment figure is 1%. And I love Speyside, the beautiful, scenic village of Speyside. However, what is the unemployment rate in Wim? The home of the minority leader, Miss Marilyn Day. What is the unemployment rate in Wim? Or in Mount Pleasant? He did not tell us. How then can he and his administration effectively devise policy prescriptions when his diagnosis is incomplete? How? So, Deputy Presiding Officer, at this time I take a pause to remember Hakeem Thomas, one of the 8 murder victims in Tobago this year. Deputy Presiding Officer, this young man was seen on social media, I think in some live that the former Deputy Chief Secretary had, before he met his untimely demise, lamenting about the lack of employment opportunities for young people in Tobago. May his soul and the souls of all who have departed due to violence rest in peace. Deputy Presiding Officer, I pause for a cause, and that cause is a moment of silence in honor of young Hakeem Thomas and all the other Tobagonians who have lost their lives in such tragic circumstances. Deputy Presiding Officer, if the Chief Secretary and his administration were truly serious about addressing unemployment in Tobago, they would go beyond the temporary solutions of 10 on, 10 off in the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development and the Division of Health and Social Protection. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is no secret that young Tobagonians, and let me repeat, young Tobagonians, bought into the mandate and promises of this administration overwhelmingly. They were sold a dream that they would be provided with employment opportunities and job security. However, Deputy Presiding Officer, they are now left to languish in despair. Deputy Presiding Officer, the records will show that the consistent policy position of PNM administrations has been to provide a high degree of stability and certainty for those engaged in both private and public sectors. To illustrate this point, Deputy Presiding Officer, one of our most recent policy decisions before demitting office was to standardize 3-year employment contracts for workers across the Assembly. This decision was driven by the PNM's resolve to empower workers, especially young, ambitious Tobagonians, so that they can face the financial institutions with a greater degree of confidence in order to increase the likelihood of securing approval for financing to undertake progressive, life-changing feats like land and home ownership. For those in the private sector, the People's National Movement administrations fully supported our small, medium, and large businesses to ensure that Tobago business owners had the capacity to keep their workers engaged, thereby facilitating the continued progression of the Tobago economy. Deputy Presiding Officer, earlier I described this administration's performance as dispiriting and demoralizing, as I find great difficulty in defining their behavior differently. Towards the people of Tobago, who supported them overwhelmingly. They disguised themselves as Spartans. Do you remember that? Spartans. And let's show the representative for Roxbury, remember that? Spartans pledging to fight for Tobago and Tobagonians. Yet most of their actions and policy decisions to date demonstrate a fight against Tobagonians and the best interests of Tobago. They hold no qualms in placing Tobagonians on the breadline. It's the first time in my life I hear in a public space a public politician, a senior public politician, threatening public servants, contracted officers, and telling them without any consideration to the rule of natural justice that we don't care, we go just fire you. What utter madness. We don't care. I, the emperor, I will just fire all you without just cause. Deputy Presiding Officer, according to the Taiwan Journal of Democracy, volume 3, number 1, pages 29 to 62, in a journal entitled by Shalandra D. Sharma, good governance has several characteristics. It is participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective, efficient, equitable, and inclusive, and follows the rule of law. At a minimum, good governance requires fair legal frameworks that are enforced impartially by an independent judiciary, and its decisions and enforcement are transparent or carried out in a manner that follows established rules and regulations. Since accountability cannot be enforced without transparency and the rule of law, accountability is a key requirement of good governance. Deputy Presiding Officer, I will now demonstrate the justification for good governance in Tobago. And one may ask, why is good governance essential in the political and economic climate of Tobago as of 2023? It is a truism that political institutions are necessary for economic development. Arguably, this is more likely to exist and function effectively under democratic rule. It is no accident that many countries that have reached the highest level of economic performance across generations are all stable democracies. In fact, one of the most robust findings of some 2 decades of research on democratization is that durable democracy is strongly correlated with economic development. Deputy Presiding Officer, the current THA administration has honored the existing procurement legislation more in breach than in its acceptance. Glaring examples include the stage in the sea, which was undertaken with no regard to the requirements under the Environmental Management Act and in accordance with proper procurement procedures. In fact, Deputy Presiding Officer, a cursory examination of that phenomenon reveals that the sea has begun to undermine the foundation of the stage. In the absence of the necessary studies, it is difficult not to assume that this action has resulted in some negative impacts in the Lambo area, much to the dissatisfaction of the residents who live on the coastline. In addition, Deputy Presiding Officer, because they got away with the approach to the construction of the stage in the sea, they tried to do the same thing with the construction of the connector road down by Friendship. Only this time, however, Deputy Presiding Officer, the AMA would have none of it. As a consequence of their predisposition to break the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, this matter is now in the High Court of this country. What is worse, Deputy Presiding Officer, but for the complaint of a gentleman residing in that area, we would not even have known that the project had begun. We would not know. It was only because of his highlighting the issue that we got a press release after giving us some information about the project, sparse information. Tobagoans are none the wiser as to what this project really entails. Have you seen the designs? My good friend from Bagatelle, Bacalet, have you seen the designs? Or my friend from Goodwood, Mount St. George? Or the well-learned councillor from Plymouth? Have you seen the designs? Absolutely no transparency, as would be expected if one is governing to the best tenets of good governance. Because I suspect this project is being treated like the audit, because I recall the Chief Secretary saying not even his colleagues, he has shown the audit. What a thing. In a clear case of follow the leader, the Division of Education, Research and Technology also displayed gross disregard for proper procurement practices. And I pause to inform the public of Tobago that after almost 8 months of requesting through the Freedom of Information to both the Division of Infrastructure and the Division of Education, Research and Technology for information regarding the roads in respect to infrastructure and the summer school repair program in respect to education, up to now, we can't get a response. But as a responsible minority leader, I have initiated actions to take this current administration for judicial review to ensure that we get that information, because what you would recognize, Deputy Presiding Officer, with respect to this Division of Education School Repair Program, the division broke set criteria with impunity. Take, for example, one of the criterion was that contractors engaged should be registered with the Central Procurement Officer. Deputy Presiding Officer, I have a list here. Let me pull it up. A list of contractors not registered, not even in the database. Chelex, not in database. ESC Extraordinaire, not in database. The list goes on. Not in the database, but getting THA work. Breaking your own criterion. Further, and they must have some previous service with the division. So if you don't, perhaps you may have done work with the division before. I could call out again. Darude Contracting Limited. I wonder if that is Carew. I wonder if Darude is just a replacement for Carew. And I wonder if the member, or if one of the members of that administration has not, don't have a close relationship with a Carew. I'm just wondering, not in that route, no previous works done, but getting contract. As far as I know, the secretary has a child for a Carew. Is that the same Carew?
Member, please retract your statement and stay relevant to the topic. Thank you.
I'm just wondering, so I retract the information shared, but I'm still wondering whether this Darude is really a Carew. That's all I'm wondering. Right? No previous service in the division. EJ Engineering, no previous works done. No previous works done. Right? However, there's a list of contractors who engage in this school repair program who were neither registered with the CPO nor provided service to the division. Deputy Presiding Officer, while the current administration had declared they will treat each electoral district equitably, the unfortunate reality is that this commitment remains unfulfilled. Deputy Presiding Officer, during May of fiscal 2022, I submitted a list of infrastructural works comprising of a minimum of 40 necessary projects across communities in the electoral district of Darrow Spring Wim. Deputy Presiding Officer, as I stand here today, less than 5% of the grand total of 2 of the listed projects have been executed. I tell you, minimum of 40, and all the people of the electoral district of Darrow Spring Wim got was a measly 2. Madam Deputy Presiding Officer, as minority leader, I am on record demanding that this administration treat with the unemployment challenges faced by all young Tobagonians. When this administration finally acceded to that call, they failed to even consider one uno name submitted from the unemployment registry of my electoral district. Not even one. And after having numerous conversations with the Chief Secretary, sending a list, because when people go down to division of works, they are being told to go by an area rep. So the people coming to me. So of course, the information we have, we share it with the Honorable Chief Secretary, and they do 10 on, they do 10 off. They do daily paid, they do short term. And I can say here, without any fear of contradiction, not one name. This representative here again, not one. Deputy Presiding Officer, how does this administration expect to build Tobago, child by child, village by village, community by community, when they are deliberately depriving the residents of Darrow Spring Wim of basic resources and employment opportunities? I shudder to think that this administration believes that the communities of Wim, Spring Garden, Darrow Spring, Glen Road, Idlewild, Montpelier, Mount Grace Heights, Wim Estate, Wim Crescent, Wim Development, Pump Mill, Montmary, Smithfield number 1, Smithfield number 2, Sansas Hill, Plymouth Road and environs, and Tobagonians and deserving of opportunities too. I shudder to think. Deputy Presiding Officer, I wish to remind my colleagues that after the election, each one of us swore an oath to serve all the people of Tobago. All the people of Tobago, irrespective of their political affiliation. This oath must be honored at all times. Deputy Presiding Officer, at this point, I want to pause to publicly thank the residents of Darrow Spring Wim for their patience and their understanding. Psalm 37:9 says, "For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land." One is enough with God. We will get through this period of political spite and victimization together, because no Good Friday lasts forever. There will always be a resurrection Sunday. Resurrection is nigh. Deputy Presiding Officer, in any modern, rapidly developing society, the infrastructural network will be tested and required upgrading to keep pace with the rate of development. Even in the first world countries, such as the United States of America, trillions of dollars have been allocated to upgrading the country's infrastructure. In essence, any progressive government that is serious about development understands that infrastructural improvements underpin a developing society. Deputy Presiding Officer, In his delivery, the Chief Secretary attempted to paint Tobago's infrastructural challenges as a unique and novel one. This could not be further from the truth. Deputy Presiding Officer, what is unique is the ad hoc manner in which this administration has set out to develop this island's infrastructure. Deputy Presiding Officer, this administration will probably go down in history as the only one to ever cite carnival or traffic as an emergency or an excuse to circumvent transparent procurement procedures to construct a new road. Imagine, Deputy Presiding Officer, in September 2022, the Chief Secretary told Tobagonians that his administration was embarking on the construction of 4 emergency roads for the purpose of the execution of Tobago's first ever carnival. The Chief Secretary also attempted to let us believe that this emergency necessitated the employment of a sole select procurement process. Deputy Presiding Officer, what Tobagonians witnessed was instead a thinly veiled plot to bring in their unregistered Trinidad financiers to pocket the entire development budget allocated to the people of Tobago. Deputy Presiding Officer, I repeat, when green leaf fall in a water, and I rest my case. To my dismay, Deputy Presiding Officer, a comparative analysis of the rate used by the previous administration when compared to this administration for the Pigeon Point to Bonaccord connector road revealed grossly inflated price. So imagine we are being told of an audit where the Chief Secretary is accusing contractors of inflating price. And here it is in this document sent in by construction by a company called Innovative Roofing Construction Solutions and accepted as a successful proposal. You know what I'm charging for to pave and put on bitumen? So the contractors, they're talking about concrete road versus bitumen road and costing for $1,400. You know what this wicked administration paying these contractors? $2,700 per ton. Twice times the amount that he's claiming the North Tobago contractors and prices are inflated. So he's saying they're corrupt. So I want to know if we Tobago contractors corrupt for charging and agreeing with the division, because they agreed, the both parties agreed this is the rate, $1,400. What will you call the acceptance of $2,700 per ton? That has to be corruption squared. Corruption 2 times. So if you want to jail Tobago contractors, you have to jail Trinidadians too. Deputy Presiding Officer, further, the total cost of the project is estimated to be $54 million. $54,781,820, as opposed to, how much this would have cost if it was a Tobago contractor using the $1,400 rate. Here what it would have cost, $36,156,000. So what this reveals, Deputy Presiding Officer, is that the project is actually $18 million more. 18. You know how much thing $18 million could do for we here in Tobago? The same administration telling you they do have money. I waiting in Mount Peter for a road just to get some patch. People bawling, people crying. They don't have no money to patch road. But here it is. You're going and build a new road and you are paying this contractor $18 million more than what it would have cost if a Tobago contractor did that job. Ain't that wickedness? Ain't that corruption? Ain't that an abuse of Tobago people? Just by way of another example, while they boast about completing the so-called emergency connector road from Smithfield to Dutch Fort in 19 days, costing over $19 million. You hear them boasting $19 million and we finish it in 19 days. But what they didn't tell you is that road costs only a whooping $1 million per day. $1 million. Who does work for $1 million a day in here? I don't even think I only reach $400 a day. But $1 million a day, they give it to them Trinidadian contractors. And you know what? I didn't just let it rest there. No? I went and got a reputable, so just so you could get auditors, I went and get a quantity surveyor to go and assess the road. You know what was the figure that the quantity surveyor assessed? I want to go slow. And this is VAT included, $7,477,476.75. There's a whole difference at $12 million. They could have built the road 3 times. 3 times they could have built the road. But this wicked administration trying to persecute and prosecute your Tobagonians, and they're giving away your money. Wicked. Deputy Presiding Officer, an aggregation of the total cost of the 4 roads at Argyle to Roxborough, and Argyle cost $25,872,000, Dutch Fort to Scarborough, $19 million, Pigeon Point to Milford Court, $54 million, and Shervan Road to Storby Local Road, $65 million, reveals a cost of $165 million. It therefore means that over $165 million of your funds have been spirited away to their favored contractor friends in Trinidad. So all of them who cussing your Tobago contractors and they have you hating your Tobago contractors, $165 million gone. Poof, goes the weasel. But Deputy Presiding Officer, when you extrapolate the 34% difference in total cost across these 4 projects, it means the Tobago contractors could have done the same work and delivered these 4 projects for $56 million less. Let me repeat, $56 million less. You know what we could do with $56 million? And here it is, the Chief Secretary going and negotiate for more money. But you're giving away, spiriting away $56 million of Tobagonian money. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why an administration that came in with so much hope? The people of Tobago trusted you all, gave you all a chance, believed in you all. And when you get that opportunity, it's about fixing yourself and your Trinidad contractors. Deputy Presiding Officer, I will go further to ask the Secretary to lay the results of the traffic survey which provided the justification for executing these emergency works in this Honorable House. Where is the traffic survey? Because you told us it was an emergency. And I think for transparency, it is only fair that you provide each member with this traffic survey that informed your policy decision. So only fair. Deputy Presiding Officer, as I have just mentioned, the central government, it would be remiss of me if I did not point out the importance of building a productive and collaborative relationship with the central government. Deputy Presiding Officer, what Tobagonians may not be aware of is that in addition to building a state-of-the-art terminal of the A&R Robinson International Airport, the previous administration had also negotiated, a lot of you all, even the colleagues here may not have known, that prior, there was an agreement and arrangement through NITCO to build a dual carriageway. So, not a single carriageway and not one lane up, one lane down. It was Tobagonians getting for the first time 2-lane thing. We are getting nice thing. We get 2 roads going up and 2 roads coming down. and we'll have been driving to a new spanking brand new airport on a spanking new dual-way carriageway road. And it also included, because up to now the member for Collar Hall, Mount Grace, Scarborough, Mount Grace, have not told us what does this road really come with. We don't know. But I could tell you what the road we were building was coming with. You are getting utility corridor. You know what is a utility corridor? You're putting all, you see them, all street lights and all them thing, the lines that was going underground. And your pipeline was going in a corridor so that you don't have to dig up the road and that kind of thing. It was going in so you're creating a utility corridor for your public utility infrastructure. You're getting roundabouts, and there was some beautification to come with it. Deputy Presiding Officer, this exciting and game-changing project would have delivered to the people of Tobago. I want to repeat this. This project was costing somewhere in the vicinity of $131 million. And hear this. Hear this. This same project that was costing $131 million, we, the people of Tobago, was going to get this project at absolutely no cost. Because you know what? The central government of Trinidad and Tobago, through NITCO, was going to not only manage the project, but they were going to fund the project. You know what we're getting in reverse? The same money they're begging Trinidad for is the same $65 million they want to pluck out from the little bit of money to go and build this road. Does that make any sense to you? So you're getting $131 million of a two-lane highway, free. But you run and you're going to build a single-lane highway out of your own money that you say you don't have for $65 million. And you have to ask this question, why? Why would one want to spend their own money on a road where you're getting less as the project scope that you would have get free? Why? Perhaps is it that you like to feel the money in your pocket? I don't know. Because it makes absolutely no sense. I know some people like to walk around with plenty of money in their pocket. Some of people say, we're mature, we're doing our own thing, we're building our own thing. But I know if I could get something built for me free lawfully, I would take it. But perhaps my friends on the other side, they probably would explain to the people of Tobago, I hope they do, why they chose to go the way of using $65 million of Tobago's scarce money to build a one-lane highway when they could have get free money building a two-lane highway over $131 million. And I have the document, so I know you're going to come. I have the document to show. I have it. Deputy Presiding Officer, I would say no more on this issue, as this administration has a date in the High Court on this very same project. 25. Right. Deputy Presiding Officer, the truth is that like the rest of Tobago, I shudder whenever I hear the words emergency, accelerate, and infrastructure in the same sentence from any member of this administration. The words are usually followed by unnecessary and illegitimate projects like stages in the sea or high court matters with the EMA. There is clearly no comprehensive plan for the infrastructural development of this island. Deputy Presiding Officer, to make matters worse, there is absolutely no transparency in the infrastructural development of Tobago. All of Tobago must be mortified and extremely circumspect as it relates to the over $600 million requested for management under the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries, and Urban Development. Only the good Lord knows whether Tobago would get value for money with these funds. Deputy Presiding Officer, I now turn to the Stony Park Enterprise Limited. The previous administration went through painstaking efforts to redevelop, refocus, and re-energize the quarrying activities at Stony Park. Deputy Presiding Officer, after the completion of the restructuring of SPEL in November of 2017, the Nordberg and Cedar Rapids crushing plants were completely refurbished with their capacities increased by over 60%. This led to a situation where SPEL was able to ramp up its production levels over 400%. Deputy Presiding Officer, additionally, the Barbados Bay Jetty was commissioned in February of 2019, leading to exports from Tobago to Trinidad. But more importantly, we were able to export aggregate to Guyana and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, thereby generating foreign exchange. The previous administration went further to negotiate with NITCO an arrangement where armored rock from SPEL was the choice material for coastal protection projects across Trinidad, so thereby increasing the output and the profitability of SPEL. Deputy Presiding Officer, can you imagine my disbelief when information came my way that a particular secretary attempted to intercept a legitimate export of material from Barbados Bay Jetty? You can very well imagine, Deputy Presiding Officer, the damage that was done to this lucrative business arrangement with legitimate entities in Trinidad. The proceeds from this arrangement benefited the people of Tobago specifically. So it is no surprise, Deputy Presiding Officer, when the data shows that construction and quarrying as a sector declined by 35%. This speaks to mismanagement, it speaks to incompetence, arrogance, and plain ignorance. Deputy Presiding Officer, it leads me to question why the Chief Secretary would signal the intention to acquire a new plant for SPEL when two perfectly working crushing plants were left by the previous administration. Who is this 60 million really for? Don't know. Maybe the pumpkin man could give us some more details. Just maybe. What is more astonishing, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm left to wonder, is if this administration does not have the capacity to keep a board in place, maintain legitimate business arrangements, maintain the current crushing plants, or even maintain previous output levels. Do they really have the capacity to add to the business offerings of SPEL? So you can't even maintain a board, confusion and bacchanal. But you expect them, because right now the governance system at SPEL is in abeyance, and it can't even manage SPEL, can't even keep the board together, can't even maintain the crushing plant. But you're looking to go and make $60 million in investment and talking about horseshoe and this shoe and all kind of shoe. Is this just another pipe dream? I have to wonder. Deputy Presiding Officer, if this exercise were not serious, it would have been a joke. How in good conscience could the Chief Secretary stand before this honorable House and speak about a request for $2 million to reinforce the jetty on Bird of Paradise Island after the Secretary of Infrastructure previously boasted about the cost effectiveness of the current construction? Why are you in need of reinforcement when you have boasted that the works that were done were for less and they were done well? So why do you need this $2 million? Deputy Presiding Officer, by now we should not be surprised, as this is consistent with their overall style of management and mismanagement over the last 18 months. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is not all doom and gloom. It is not. I am pleased to see that the Chief Secretary intends to pay some attention, finally, to his electoral district. So I'm happy for the people of Palative, Lansome, Speyside. The mention of solution for Turpin Bend is a welcome addition to the priorities of this administration for fiscal 2024. Deputy Presiding Officer, the former administration went through exhaustive process of public consultations, environmental surveys, topographical surveys, geotechnical surveys, among others, in order to produce actual designs for the re-engineering of Turpin Bend. Deputy Presiding Officer, Tobagonians can only hope and pray that this Turpin-Bend solution does not become another fly-by-night emergency project, and instead the THA resources already invested into developing these plans will not go to waste. When I turn to education, Deputy Presiding Officer, I now turn to the critical issue of education. There are two basic philosophies that undergird the process of education: pedagogy and andragogy. The former speaks to a situation where the teacher has the responsibility to mentor or coach his or her children to achieve the various learning goals. In other words, the teacher has the task of motivating the children to learn. The latter has to do with adult education, where the basic assumption is that adults take responsibility for their own learning. In other words, adults are effectively self-directed learners. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is clear after listening to the presentation of the Chief Secretary that those who have the responsibility to manage the education portfolio at this time are inadequate for the task. Indeed, they might have proven their worth more in organizing the recruitment of individuals for propaganda campaigns. On page 34 of the budget statement document, bullet point number 2, it states, special and targeted intervention programs to deal with the COVID-19 induced learning losses. In addition, at paragraph 4.80, it states, we need to develop an online system that will allow students who can learn independently to do so with intermittent supervision. The same paragraph states as well, it will also allow parents with the capacity and time to teach their children at home. Do they really expect, Deputy Presiding Officer, that a 3 to 5-year-old child will learn independently with minimal teacher intervention? Do they really expect that? Should we really depend on parents who have the capacity to be a substitute for trained teachers? What about the parents who don't have the capacity? What happens to the children of such parents? This is a glaring omission. Additionally, no details are provided nor samples given about what the special and targeted and programs will look like. Maybe the Assistant Secretary can speak more to this, as he has an adequate background in education. In particular, the final sentence of the point made at section 4.79, speaking as if it can magically be put in place. When the minority brought in the House its first motion, the need for the implementation of a work from home policy, it was laughed and scorned at. You remember that, Minority Councillor? But yet it is recorded here as a magical plan to implement. So at least you could at least give the minority some credit. Smart school upgrades cannot take place within the next fiscal year. This is simply not feasible. The pandemic disproportionately disadvantaged students. Would the Secretary be able to enlighten us on an analysis about our students as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? Does such information reside within the ambit of the Division of Education? The pandemic shifted the burden from the school to families, and this had grave consequences. There are legacy issues, and I'm hoping the Secretary would be able to say what the impact is on the academic integrity of our education system. As you know, Deputy Presiding Officer, it became easier for students to cheat. That is the reality. Some parents did work for their children, and some children were unsupervised during online sessions. Online educators were exposed to legal issues such as copyright for the inappropriate misuse of programs and lectures. The lack of student-to-teacher interaction left students feeling less passionate about their schoolwork, and we saw the effects of that with the school violence when they returned. Research around the world showed that on average, Teachers in primary school were coping worse than teachers at the secondary and tertiary level. One is given the impression by the document that it is an easy transition by implying that a 4-year-old can go online and independently acquire the skills, knowledge, and attitudes required by the curriculum with only intermittent teacher involvement. Teachers would tell you that many students struggled with self-sufficiency and fell behind primarily due to distractions in their homes and online. Deputy Presiding Officer, are we really serious about what we are doing in education? Can the Secretary indicate in a contribution what is the current state of mental health of students, teachers, and parents as a result of post-COVID impacts? This concern is legitimate if only because the Secretary seems to be postulating a model where, to use her words, parents with the capacity and the time to teach their children at home will be allowed to do so. Deputy Presiding Officer, the document also made reference towards upgrading and modernizing our schools towards smart school classification and certification. There is no definition about what constitutes the smart school. What would it entail? What would be the modalities? What specific impact would it have on teacher training? What is the cost to repurpose these schools and in what time frame? Because if we were to go by the school repair program, which is still ongoing, I must say, whole year, and you still have school under repair, then what would happen to our schools? Even an examination of the estimates does not provide the answer. I sincerely hope that the Secretary and this Assistant Secretary can provide the information that will satisfy the discerning population in Tobago that this administration perhaps knows what they are about. Deputy Presiding Officer, repurposing of our school nutrition program. There are no details. I'm hoping that the Secretary can provide some details. I'm aware that under the previous administration, there was a restructuring of the menu to link the school nutrition program with local agricultural production. Deputy Presiding Officer, the children used to clean their plates, enjoying the fruits, good Tobago products like cassava, and I think sometime I saw saltfish, I see them enjoying the banana that was planted as well. To put it in local vernacular, they used to lick up their fingers. Deputy Presiding Officer, given that the intention is to address the rising level of obesity and non-communicable diseases among our children, the document is silent in respect of a strategy designed to raise the level of physical activity of our students within our schools. As a part of a collaborative program between the Division of Education, Youth and Sport, coaches went to schools to assist with physical education activities. They complemented the sports program that was being executed in the schools. And I'm simply asking, is this still in place, Deputy Presiding Officer? Deputy Presiding Officer, this approach was consistent with the vision of the past administration for the overall development of our future men and women of Tobago. Deputy Presiding Officer, collaboration across divisions was indeed the necessary axis around which the operations of the THA revolved. However, Deputy Presiding Officer, it seems as though today these divisions are operating in silos, and that is the only reason why you have land management under the Office of the Chief Secretary awarding a plot of land down at Friendship to some investors to do a water park, and then the Secretary of Infrastructure building a road straight through the water park. They're operating in silos. They don't talk in exec, because I can for once understand how you can award to one to do a development, and then in the same breath, the Secretary awarding to a contractor to build a road. Perhaps they will explain. Deputy Presiding Officer, I revert to education. Permit me to give you a snapshot of what the education system looked like under the previous administration. A retrospective view on education. In 2019, online education was systematically and structurally introduced in all schools in Tobago from ECC to tertiary. There was comprehensive training of principals and teachers by Information Technology Training Partnership Network, ITTPN. There were sensitization sessions of parents and guardians. Devices were provided to allow access for all students and teachers. There was collaboration with internet providers to make connectivity more predictable. The education website was relaunched and improved. Online teaching is already available to mature and advanced learners. A seamless approach to development of education from nursery to tertiary needs to be continued. The word seamlessly was mentioned loosely to move from in-person teaching and learning to online model. An online model already exists. No mention of strategies or programs to transition students from ECCE to primary level. No policy or program to provide support for teachers at the primary level. The instructional coaches were disbanded and cast into the SEA, the C, with absolutely nothing to replace it. Interestingly, the Ministry of Education has now embraced this program with open arms, and it is in the implementation stage in schools in Trinidad. There is need for continuous professional development of teachers as a year-round activity. The Teachers Professional Development Center was disbanded when this administration came into office. What has become of the impact program that was supposed to be a year-long initiative to assist students who scored under 30% at SEA? Not a word on this in the budget. Is it that the program has gotten lost in the sea as well? Teachers and students are in need of instructional support that will facilitate a more seamless and comfortable movement into the secondary schools. Disbandment of the Pan and Music in School program for primary schools. No focus on the aesthetic development of our students. Stakeholders of the Scarborough Secondary School are aghast with the protracted delay of the construction of the school. The relationship that were developed with the tertiary education institutions have been eroded. These relationships facilitated a seamless movement of students from secondary to tertiary education. Relationships with MIC, YTEP, CCC, and others have weakened. Minor mention of the importance of technical vocational education for Tobago. A cost-effective and partnership approach was in place, but has been overlooked and disregarded. This neglect minimized the number of Tobagoans with access to TVET education. The expansion of the Roxborough Trade Center and integration with Roxborough Secondary are not new suggestions. The idea of upgrading THTI to university status seems to have been abandoned by this administration. Madam Presiding Officer, I now turn to the health sector. Deputy Presiding Officer. Deputy Presiding Officer, if the present administration is serious about addressing the health priorities of the Tobago population, the administration would have presented a clinical program that addresses health and wellness, which is consistent with Goal 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which speak to a focus on good health and well-being. They would have also focused on risk factor reduction, for example, increasing the availability and consumption of healthier diets, and taking steps to increase the levels of physical activity among the population. In the development of a plan for this population, the focus and emphasis must be, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I wish to ask, for which population is this plan? Sorry, Deputy Presiding Officer. In the development of a plan for this population, the focus and emphasis must be on 1, primary prevention, which includes health promotion and disease prevention, and 2, secondary prevention, which includes diagnosis, treatment and care, rehabilitation, and palliative care. Madam Deputy Presiding Officer, I wish to ask, for which population is this plan? It just cannot be Tobago. This population faces serious non-communicable diseases, for example, cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks and strokes, cancers, hypertension and diabetes. What is their response? They superficially speak of quality of life. Whilst they speak about improving the quality of life, there is no plan to do that. Quality of life has to do with the impact of a perceived health state in the context of a person's ability to live a fulfilling life. When we speak of a quality of life from a health disease perspective, it has to do with the social, emotional, and physical well-being of a patient adhering to his or her treatment. In fact, this is consistent with the WHO definition of health. Where in the budget document is the articulated plan for such? None, nada, nil. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Chief Secretary comments on the health sector have left little doubt that this administration is yet to get a clear understanding of the strategic management of Tobago's health sector. I am left to believe the numerous complaints that the Secretary of Health has no clear vision or plan to achieve the goals set out in the Sustainable Development Goal number 3, good health and well-being, which are also echoed in the National Vision 2030 plan. Quite simply, Deputy Presiding Officer, they on that side do not have a clue. I was waiting to hear how they would reduce the number of citizens affected by NCDs. Nothing. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is said if you diagnose incorrectly, you would prescribe incorrectly. So in order to have an accurate diagnosis, there must be an abundance of accurate information and data. None has been provided. As a matter of fact, Deputy Presiding Officer, I was listening attentively for the data on the NCD's mortality rate. There was none. Cancer mortality rate, none. Hypertension rate, nada. Diabetes mortality rate, zilch. Deputy Presiding Officer, continuing with this theme of health and wellness, the question remains, how is this function going to be delivered when you have not shown how screening would be strengthened at the primary care level? All you have said is that you would improve primary care. Tell us how. What is the plan and how you plan to do that? Deputy Presiding Officer, the previous administration committed to and delivered on the following: empowerment of the people to lead their healthier lifestyles, school health, nutrition education, education and testing for NCDs, mental health awareness, health promotion and disease prevention. Deputy Presiding Officer, in reality, in order to have any positive impact on the rate of NCDs, you need the data. This data is used to plan the services which are responsive to the needs. Are you aware that the previous administration had established a NCD registry? Are you aware of that? Deputy Presiding Officer, a few words of advice to this administration. Settle down, buckle down, and focus on the task at hand. Settle down, buckle down, and focus on the task at hand. Stop toying with the lives of Tobagonians. Deputy Presiding Officer, at present there are 17 health centers and 2 state-of-the-art hospitals. This is part of the impressive legacy of successive PNM administrations. The fact that this administration plans to upgrade only the Plymouth Health Center and the Canaan Health Center to a district facility bears eloquent testament to the quality and well-appointed nature of our health centers and hospitals which they inherited. Deputy Presiding Officer, through you, I would like to ask the Honorable Chief Secretary whether he has ever made a visit to the spanking New Roxborough Hospital a project undertaken by a PNM THA and a PNM central government. Notwithstanding health is an item in the 5th schedule, that is what collaboration brings you. And that's why I keep telling you all, there's a difference between fighting and fighting up. When you fight, is the grass that gets trampled. But when you fight up and you collaborate, you get things done for those that depend on the services. Deputy Presiding Officer, a new neonatal ICU for Tobago is a great idea. Very good idea. But the question is, how is the Chief Secretary, or for that matter, the Secretary of, or the question is the Chief Secretary, or for that matter, the Secretary of Health, aware of the list of the pharmaceuticals required for the hospital to operate effectively that are currently unavailable and has been so for some time? Are you aware that the list is exhaustive? As far as on about 8 or so pages of pharmaceuticals that the hospital just don't have? Are you aware, Deputy Presiding Officer, that there's no supply of Coreg for heart failure? So if anyone of we drop down here now, we're in trouble. Avodant for men with prostate. So all them fellas that, as you know, black men as we age, we start to get prostate problem. If you go up to the hospital, no medication for you. Medication for diabetes. Medication for people with STDs, sickle cell. And Deputy Presiding Officer, I have not even exhausted the list. I am sure, given the complaints I have received, that if one were to compile a list, it would be anywhere between 8 to 10 pages long. Where are you planning to pay the services for neonatologists? Where are you paying? That's an expensive expenditure. How are you going to pay it? You need to tell us. Now, I want to especially emphasize on the issue at Roxborough Hospital. There's a need for a new hyperbaric chamber. Where is the new hyperbaric chamber promised for Roxborough? Deputy Presiding Officer, it is my understanding that we are paying a private contractor from Trinidad again $288,000 a month to burn biowaste for the disposal of biowaste, while the microwave incinerator at Roxborough has never been turned on. So here it is, brand new incinerator at Roxborough, never turned on. But somebody paying a supplier from Trinidad $288,000 a month. How much money that is a year? Let's say my math's good. You're paying at least $2 million, almost close to $3 million. All right, chartered accountant, $3 million a year to burn biowaste when you have a spanking new one sit down up at Roxborough. Deputy Presiding Officer, many of the medical services at the Roxborough Hospital are not being carried out due to the failure of the Secretary to engage the relevant staff. One is left to wonder whether this is because this building was delivered under the People's National Movement Administration. Is this spiting the people of Tobago East because the PNM built this hospital for the people of Tobago East? You propose to purchase a new MRI unit as well as a CT scan unit. But I ask the question, what is the timeline for this acquisition? Because given the long lead time for acquisition of these pieces of equipment, have you begun the process of procuring these pieces of equipment? Tell us. If so, on what stage of the process are you currently at? For example, have you already done an RFP? Tell us. How much was the final settlement for the wrongful dismissal of the general manager of HR? Because I asked that question in this house. Let us know, let Tobagonians know how much you all settled because you had in place a CEO with no board. Let us know. Waste again, precious Tobago money. Tell us what you all paid, because I understand it is in the millions. And while we were telling you all, we cautioned you all about that arrangement, but the secretary perhaps was happy to have someone that you had full control, perhaps. So there was no rush. But it has cost us millions of taxpayers' dollars. The budget states that the division intends to digitize the following: medical records, pharmacy, laboratory, but Deputy Presiding Officer, so little is known by this administration, because if they had done or took the time to liaise with the relevant professionals and public servants within the division, they would have known that there is already a laboratory information system implemented at the Scarborough General Hospital. Guess my good friend left the Division of Health too early. For the record, the previous administration had already planned the expansion of outpatient oncology services by upgrading the old nurses' hostel and utilizing it for oncology patients. A budget was also provided for phase 1. Let me turn to emergency ambulances, because I understand that is a great challenge right now. Deputy Presiding Officer, when the previous administration demitted office, they left 6 of the 10 emergency ambulances working. Let me repeat, 6 of the 10 were working on the watch of the current secretary and deputy chief secretary. You know how much working to service all at Tobago? Only 2 ambulances are currently working. What a disaster. All the time, you know? You see her, she on Channel 5, she on update, she doing live. She know everything about health. Now we give her 6 ambulances and we're down to 2. Tell me about that. Deputy Presiding Officer, I take note of the fact there's the intention to convert the Canaan Health Center to a district health facility so as to provide extended hours of service for the people of Canaan and environs to 24 hours. Whilst I have no issue with the intent in principle, the question must be asked, is there data which supports the need for this move? Because I realize this administration seems to be an administration by VAPs. I feel too. It sounds nice. It looks good. But what are the data underpinning these fundamental policy decisions? And if so, can the Secretary with the responsibility read into the record of this Honorable House the data that unquestionably supports this move? Deputy Presiding Officer, this administration approved 2 motions in this House dealing with social protection. I recall an all-of-government approach to ensure that the needs of all vulnerable women and children are met, and a one-stop diagnostic initiative. Disappointingly, this budget fails to report on the success or lack thereof of these very initiatives whereby the administration had planned to utilize a whole-of-government approach to its distribution of social support to those persons most in need in Tobago, using a case conferencing model. Would the Secretary in her response please provide the necessary evaluation and any future contemplated action? We want to know, because I recall pointedly, you get that a directive was given that the policy will be developed by June of 2022. We are in June of 2023, where the policy there. Wait there. Deputy Presiding Officer, one would have expected that this administration would seek to strengthen surveillance at our various ports of entry in alignment with our tourism sector. One recalls the unfortunate incident at the port in Charlottesville in circumstances where a cruise ship docked and there was an absence of port health staff to do the necessary monitoring and surveillance. Additionally, shouldn't we be strengthening our hotel-based surveillance as well, so as to reduce the incidence of foodborne diseases to residents and visitors alike? Deputy Presiding Officer, I turn to waste disposal management. The budget document is silent on the whole question of waste disposal at Stony Park Quarry, at Stony Park, sorry. Deputy Presiding Officer, we on this side and the rest of Tobago are curious to know about the administration's plan for sustainable waste disposal. Tell us. Deputy Presiding Officer, I now turn my attention to the agricultural sector. Take my time with agriculture. Like agriculture. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is great to see that the administration has chosen to implement mega farms. So accrediting the Secretary. Good to see, nice idea. It sounds good. An idea close to the heart of the late Prime Minister, Mr. Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning. My only concern will be who gets the opportunities to develop these farms and what will be the process. Are we going to be just hand-picking people, or are we going to allow Tobagonians with the requisite passion and capacity to participate in this program? We hope that you will not go down the road and the route we saw with Novo Farms, because at this point, while Novo Farms, they have been benefiting. I saw a bill, I think it's $2 million for product for the food box program. $2 million. Tobagonians were balling. Remember this farmer guy, balling. Then taking the products. They had to beg, they had to make noise. And Novo Farm was going with $2 million. Give me crushed pumpkin and all kind of things, and we could get fresh pumpkin from Tobago. The Tobago Agricultural Research Institute was proposed in the last budget, and we see it come up again. We hope it is not yet one of the many promises made by this administration that is not kept, because hope it doesn't, because I don't think we'll have too much longer, eh? So hasten your footsteps. Deputy Presiding Officer, I also have concerns about the markets and food hubs that have been planned. However, if you talk to the farmers in Tobago, they are very disturbed by the shift in usage of the temporary market facility at Shore Park to a food hub. Deputy Presiding Officer, in addition to food sales, what we see are entertainment activities, including all-fours tournament. So imagine the food hub hosting all-fours, karaoke nights, birthday parties for plasters and others, juve parties, and the list goes on and on. Deputy Presiding Officer, I remind this honorable House that the intention of that facility, once the renovated Scarborough Market was completed, was to be used as a farmer's market. You know that? That facility was to be used as a farmer's market. It is no wonder that on this administration's watch, agricultural production declined by 9.5% and only contributed a meager 2% to the island's overall GDP for the period under review. Deputy Presiding Officer, we also observed the move to produce alternative flowers, and again, I want to express the displeasure being voiced by the stakeholders in the sector that this administration has abandoned the facility and equipment constructed at Glosborough. Deputy Presiding Officer, if you listen to this administration's plans for alternative flowers and agro-processing, you would recognize that there is a clear disconnect. This administration is seeking to supply the domestic market with over 6 tons of flour. Currently, Tobago produces only about 4,000 pounds of cassava per month. However, it would be folly to think all of that can produce in Tobago on a monthly basis. Obviously, they have to import. Therefore, I hope the Secretary can disclose in her presentation the details of the agreement which was signed between Novo and the THA. I hope that the Secretary will lay in this honorable House the MOU that outlines the details of the arrangement between the Tobago House of Assembly and the Novo farms. Deputy Presiding Officer, the aim of the previous administration was to build the agro-processing sector in Tobago. Flour was but one of the products to be produced. They intended to use all root crops at the facility to produce flour, fries, chips, mixes, composite flours, etc. The previous administration even brought in equipment for the small agro-processors to have access to. The entire value chain with crops and animals was targeted. Deputy Presiding Officer, at present, the construction of the facility at Goldsboro is halted. This is a total waste of taxpayers' money where an investment was already made and now that project is being abandoned. This facility is a far superior facility to the sea blast-ridden packing house. The majority of the farmers are located from Goldsboro to Charlottesville. Hence, this Goldsboro facility is an ideal location. I note that we are now carrying the packing house down to Cove, and this would be a significant inconvenience for farmers who are located mainly in Tobago East. Deputy Presiding Officer, I cannot help but notice that TADCO is now taking the products produced by the small agro-processors, slap their label on it, and market it as their own. This model was previously explored. However, it was proven to be unsuccessful in empowering the small agro-processors to grow. The plans of the previous administration was to create opportunities and markets for the predictable purchase and distribution of value-added products of the agro-processors. Deputy Presiding Officer, there's a lot of construction planned for the sector, and while these facilities are necessary, one must question the resources of Tobago, whether the resources of Tobago can accommodate these projects. For example, the mega farm project is estimated to cost 51 million, and there's an allocation of 39 million earmarked for development works in agriculture. The question is, Deputy Presiding Officer, are these projects realistic? Will the division have $90 million available to implement these projects? So again, I ask, are these projects realistic? Deputy Presiding Officer, if the administration is comfortable with selling dreams and unrealistic promises, then I would want to suggest very strongly that they immediately call the elections and allow the people of Tobago to elect a responsible government. I repeat, and strongly suggest that if this administration is intended on only selling dreams while Tobagonians perish in nightmare, then they might as well call the elections and allow the people of Tobago to elect a responsible government. Deputy Presiding Officer, arguably, there is a strong nexus between economic growth and job creation. As stated earlier, we recognize that the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in significant contractions to the Tobago economy and consequential job losses in the fledgling private sector on the island. In light of the current state of the island's economy, it is imperative that critical action be taken to stimulate the Tobago economy. In this regard, the following can be pursued. 1, facilitate mortgages for 25 to 40-year-olds for households earning less than $10,000 per month through negotiated arrangements with financial institutions. Example, banks, credit unions, and the TTMF. This strategy can have the intended advantage of stimulating the construction industry, thereby providing jobs to our contractors and our skilled and semi-skilled artisans. The approach will also increase the opportunities for the development of small, micro, and medium enterprises in providing the necessary goods and services for these projects. 2, create and implement a business development and trade facilitation unit that supports innovation both in the public and private sectors on the island. Such an initiative is necessary to provide the required mentoring and coaching in order to build confidence in our entrepreneurs, as well as to assist them in accessing and penetrating the domestic market, Trinidad with a population of 1.3 million, as well as markets in the Caribbean, Latin America, and North America. 3, optimize the use of our trade centers, as well as expanding the current construction certification training program started under the previous administration under the Division of Education. This targeted intervention is designed to increase the pool of skilled and semi-skilled persons on the island, thereby providing both opportunities for job creation as well as individual contractors or accessing job opportunities in the construction sector. 4, continue the initiatives started by the previous administration of transitioning THTI into a Tobago-based university, expanding the current offerings of civil engineering, agriculture and tourism, and business. At present, there's a collaboration between THTI and UTT. This collaboration can be strengthened to include programs such as the performing and fine arts, physical education and fashion and design, and marine engineering, to name a few. Such collaboration can also be extended to other regional and international universities. Deputy Presiding Officer, not only will this initiative ensure that we cater for the multiple intelligences and talents of our people, but THTI as a full-fledged university, through the attraction of foreign students, can become a pivotal axis for the stimulation of economic activity throughout the island. Deputy Presiding Officer, herein lies the fundamental difference between those on this side and those on the other side. We are not making vague, flowery statements for the sake of padding a document. For the sake of padding document, just put it in figures. On the contrary, we are positing specific, doable, innovative ideas, whilst simultaneously illustrating the links to economic development, including presenting the intended advantages that can accrue to our residents as well as our economy. So we are not just writing one-word statements with no explanation as to the how, to the why, what are the knock-on effects. We are not doing that. We are showing you the plan, we are telling you how we will implement the plan, and we are telling you about the benefits to be derived from the plan. P&M style. Deputy Presiding Officer, I now turn my attention to tourism. The Tobago tourism industry, after achieving record highs under the P&M administration, has battled through a number of external shocks beyond our control. Global economic downturns, wars, terrorism, devastating natural disasters, chaos in the airline industry, global health crises such as SARS, and one can never forget the dreaded COVID-19 pandemic, have put a dent in the tourism industry. In the meantime, Deputy Presiding Officer, the rapidly evolving digital age, coupled with the liberalization of air travel opened up new competing destinations in Southeast Asia, such as Thailand and Indonesia. Major capital investment in the hospitality sector saw competitors develop expansive new luxury resorts and attractions. Major players from China and even the Arab countries also saw tourism as a way to diversify their oil and gas investment portfolios, such as Dubai project reaped huge rewards and was regarded as visionary. Deputy Presiding Officer, the PNM administration was saddled with the perennial challenge of difficult negotiations with airlines to service the island, as they often complained of three specific challenges. One was the stock of high-end rooms, which was too low. Two, the exit of Hilton meant there were no more brand-name hotels. And three, the A&R Robinson International Airport does not currently have any hospitality suites, and such they could not promote the destination to first class and business class passengers. For the sake of the records, Deputy Presiding Officer, it should be noted that in 2010, the then Patrick Manning-led PNM administration had assented to and had proceeded to tender and award the contract for the construction of a new airport terminal for Tobago. This is public knowledge, Deputy Presiding Officer. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is also public knowledge that when the Kamala Persad-Bissessar-led People's Partnership government, of which members in this House sat in the Senate, they, for ease of reference, and I shall refer to as the friends of this administration, took office in 2010, and they jettisoned the airport reconstruction project. This is all public knowledge. Madam Deputy Presiding Officer, it was with these preceding factors in mind that the previous administration engaged the attention of a Prime Minister who was willing to actively address the perennial challenges listed above. Hence, Deputy Presiding Officer, the determination of the Honorable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley led central government to execute the previously mentioned Sandals project, the Marriott Hotel project, coupled with the construction of a modern airport terminal with all of the necessary amenities. These were not vanity projects, Deputy Presiding Officer. These are visionary projects. Now repeat, these are visionary projects. These projects were meant to address the debilitating challenges the tourism sector on the island faces year in, year out. Yet, Deputy Presiding Officer, those on the other side collaborated with their friends from Trinidad to stop the Sandals. They attempted to stop the Marriott, and we know that they attempted to halt the airport project. To the dismay of a vast majority of tourism stakeholders and most right-thinking Tobagonians, they did succeed in stopping the Sandals project. Thankfully, they weren't so successful with the airport. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, you can imagine my utter shock and disbelief when I heard this Chief Secretary, while among international stakeholders at ITB in Germany, boasting about these upcoming projects. I wanted to know if it's the same Chief Secretary. When I heard the man talking about rebuilding a brand new international airport, that could be the same airport you were telling people to march and don't move from. And that's why I continue to say, the member for Palativia, Lansome Speyside purports to be, and the person that he truly is, are two completely different people. Deputy Presiding Officer, he who is in the kitchen rarely feels the heat. And I'm glad they're feeling the heat now, because before outside, when they were looking outside and watching the People's National Movement take Tobago through unprecedented development for 21 years. They thought it was easy. We made it look easy. But now that they're in the hot seat, you're hearing secretaries telling people, rest me, give me a break. Some of them telling them, but I can't give everybody work. They're balling. They now feel how difficult governance truly is. Deputy Presiding Officer, while we are at the topic of airports, I wish to set the record straight on the matter of Condor Airlines. This airline has serviced Tobago on a seasonal basis since 2015. Deputy Presiding Officer, despite the boast by the Chief Secretary in his presentation on Monday, I have information that the leadership of the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited mishandled the straightforward negotiations so badly that we almost did not have the flight at all, because you will recall that there was a window of absence. They handled that negotiation so badly, we almost lost out on that Condor contract. Deputy Presiding Officer, as we are on the matter of TTAL and its leadership, I wish to register some grave concerns. In April of this year, Deputy Presiding Officer, in this very chamber, you may recall that the Secretary of Tourism was asked a number of questions concerning the Executive Chairman of TTAL by my colleague, the Minority Councillor. This individual was apparently given the additional responsibility of duties of CEO because, and I quote, it was recognized that within the organizational structure of the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited, there existed no other senior person who could take up the chair as an acting CEO. During that time, so a decision was taken to ask the chairman to perform executive chairman duties, and that was agreed to at an executive council meeting. Deputy Presiding Officer, as a result, the secretary indicated that the executive chairman, who happens to be a close relative of a former minority leader of this house, now receives a handsome remuneration of over $45,000 plus allowances. Deputy Presiding Officer, I have a serious concern. I have before me information that at the time this decision was made, the then product development manager not only had years of relevant experience, but he is also the holder of a PhD in tourism. So here it is, the secretary came to the house, telling the house, misleading the house, that there was no one within the management framework of the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited with the relevant qualifications to hold on or act in the post of CEO. But here it is, information at hand shows that the director of product development had a PhD in tourism. So and multiple years in experience, as far as I understand, he's managing a hotel now. And I want you to juxtapose that. In an island where tourism is at its all-time low, you throw away a man with a PhD in tourism, and you install and appoint a close relative of a former minority leader that now is, as far as I understand, one of the behind-the-doors advisors of this administration to the position of CEO. Executive chairman, sorry, but also having the CEO position. And what that means, therefore, and the question is, I would like the goodly secretary, when she comes, to tell us how this executive chairman is more qualified than this gentleman with a PhD. The question is, does she even have qualifications in tourism. Tell us. And what is a qualification? What is a previous experience in tourism management? Because you cannot tell me your island is underperforming. Your island is at a point where it needs to rebound from and rebuild its tourism sector. And you put basically a novice to run the affairs of the tourism. All in a serious? Are these people really serious? You take a complete novice, an inexperienced person, not even a qualification in tourism, to head Tobago's most important sector, and you expect to get the requisite results? That is the definition of madness. Deputy Presiding Officer, so you could understand how this could create an environment that is demoralizing. Because if I have better qualifications than you, but you supervising me, how I as the employee below you would feel? As far as I understand, the environment there is toxic, and there is currently an exodus of qualified and experienced staff. This is yet another attempt to enrich their friends, and it is a blatant show that they just do not care about the people of Tobago. The executive chairman has been busy ensuring that the funds earmarked for specific projects and programs, they are spent on travel. Look, I have a travel bill here. ITB alone, Deputy Presiding Officer. ITB alone, watch it. Breakdown of per diem and stakeholder support for travel contingent. Miss Alicia Edwards, $37,392. $37,000. Chris James, $37,000. Pearl Henry, $37,000. The total cost of airfare for the total traveling contingent, $94,000. Both expenses for the destination stand, $1,458,000. Videography and photography expenses, $218,000. Chief Secretary Farley's expense inclusive.
Member, I spoke to you about the name callings already. Address.
Chief Secretary, I'm reading the
address by
Chief
portfolio.
Secretary Farley Augustine's expense inclusive of airfare and related allowances, inclusive of per diem. 88,000. 88,000. Secretary of the Division of, here this one here, Secretary of Tourism, 94,000 for how much days? How much days this be? 5 days? Breakdown, 7 days, sorry. The breakdown of the cost. It has security to it, 38,000. Another 38,000. Another 38,000. 29,000. 29,000. 29,000. 29,000. How much thousand this be now? Deputy Presiding Officer, this is scandalous. Very. I want all you really, how all of us feel about when all you hear these things? Truthfully, as independents. Hearing how Tobago money is being wasted on traveling. And what were the rewards? I hope that when the Secretary stands, she will tell us what because we spend over $3 million. And there's something called ROI, return on investment. I would love to hear what are the return on investment accrued to the people of Tobago from this trip. Because you carry a big contingent. So I would have expected by now we're getting 100,000 tourists. Where the tourists them there? Where they there?
Minority Councillor.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I beg to move that the House remain seated until the Minority Leader finishes its presentation.
Members, the question put is that the Minority Leader be allowed to finish his presentation and then we break for lunch. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minority Leader, you may continue.
Presiding Officer, and while we're on this, I also want to read into the records a question asked on the budget for the Tobago Carnival based on the expenses and continued expenses, $9 million. And then the Tobago Carnival in February, another almost $10 million, that's $19 million. Deputy Presiding Officer, and if we figure in jazz, that's another $8.5 million. 3 festivals within the space of 6 months have cost the people of Tobago almost $30 million, where the requisite and relevant benefits. $30 million spent in 6 months. Where the tourists them there? Where they there? We not see them. $30 million. I want the numbers, bring out the numbers, they reevaluate. Let Tobagonians know that you spent $30 million on festivals and how many tourists came. Let us know and tell us how many Tobagonians benefit. Because I also asked a question. We've seen how our Tobagonian service providers are being starved, so they're taking the people them food, or they're drinking the people them drinks, and all them not paying the people them afterwards. Is months they're waiting, but they're jettisoning and enjoying $90,000 in per diem and all kind of madness. Or they're so having a good time, or they're eating with knife and fork, no more bread and butter. Or they're done with bread and butter issues. Or they're enjoying it. Imagine somebody got Jamaica for a birthday party in here. 4 secretaries going to Jamaica to sign 1 MOU. And when you look at the report, imagine you're going for 9 days, but you only have 1 activity. 9 days you're up in Jamaica, but you have 1 activity. You could imagine the bill. 4 people, and up to now we ain't see the MOU. We've been asking for the MOU. Up to now we can't see MOU, but 4 secretaries, all they do have work to do. Because I can't see for a serious administration that's seeing about serious business. 4 executive members will leave this island to go and sign an MOU that nobody have seen as yet. Madness. All they do have work. If all they do work, get out. One is spending and wasting Tobagonian money, $30 million. Where the benefits? Deputy Presiding Officer, I have even more questions than answer given the contradicting statements of the Chief Secretary on Monday. During his presentation, the Honourable Member boasted about the crucial role that Tobago Festival Commission has to play. These statements were made even after the instruction was given to remove the responsibility for the planning and execution of the Tobago Heritage Festival from the Festivals Commission. And as far as I understand, and the Secretary, and instead, this Bumpers Festival were given to the Assistant Secretary to the Department of Culture. Deputy Presiding Officer, as far as I understand, I say it's going to be a bumper season. What is baffling me, Deputy Presiding Officer, is the statement that the administration intends to widen the reach of the Tobago Heritage Festival. But yet, you are scaling down the festival. How could you widen a road, but cut short the road? How could you widen, you understand me, Minority? You're saying it's going to be bumper, you're going to create something bigger and better. But yes, you're cut off. I remember I'm from Wim, and though we hadn't had the wake and bongo for a while, I know other villages would have adopted the wake and bongo. Where's the wake and bongo? I used to like to go Golden Lane as well, where they tell stories. Where Golden Lane, where the events of Golden Lane. That bumper like he lose some ear. That bump, I ain't seen the bumper at all. Deputy Presiding Officer, A people without a culture is a people without a soul. I want to repeat that. A people without a culture is a people without a soul. We have to ensure that our children have an appreciation for culture when you scale down. How will they know or learn about these things? What are we doing to our people? We are going to leave our children soulless. Deputy Presiding Officer, can any one of you dance the jig on that side? Can you all jig? Can you all jig? Huh? I wonder. Deputy Presiding Officer, I'm informed that many of the current secretaries have only attended the Charlottesville. I hear them out of their own mouth say that on camera. This is the first time I've been to Charlottesville. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is no wonder that they don't want that. It is no wonder that they want to scale it down. It's not important to them. They have never seen heritage as an important part of the fabric of the people of Tobago. They do not understand nor respect the significance. Deputy Presiding Officer, if we jump to the upcoming Tobago Carnival, I beg to ask the question, what are the lessons learned from the last Tobago Carnival? What is being done differently for the second staging of the Tobago Carnival? One lesson that certainly was not learned earlier is earlier planning, as the staff at festivals are still awaiting some or any directive on the way forward. And my understanding is not just the staff. I speak to many stakeholders in the carnival fraternity and the people making the mass band leaders. They also don't know. People want to book flights. They don't know. They don't know what's going on. No direction, no information. But you know what is sad? When you look at the marketing budget, imagine marketing for the jazz, which started to be promoted. Well, I don't even know where they promote the jazz. But you know how much was the marketing price for the jazz? $2.4 million. When they spend that money? What they spend that money on? $2.4 million, and you only start marketing because nobody knew the date of the jazz until 1 month before. You barely see any advertisement. You barely see any flyer. You barely see any billboard. But $2.4 million on marketing for jazz. And I'm sure, well, last time they went Grenada, I wonder where they're going to fly to go and learn about Carnival. Imagine, you fly over Trinidad because you want to go first class and enjoy taxpayers' money on trip. So you run to Grenada to learn about Jab Jab. But I expect to see Jab Jab in this mass this year, because I didn't see none. I look for Jab Jab, no Jab Jab. No Jab Jab. But I like Carnival, so I expect to play Jab Jab, because that trip, you remember how much that trip was? Almost $300,000. So you leave your counterparts in Trinidad. Trinidad is Mecca of Carnival. Imagine I was in Miami, happened to be in Miami, and you know who up there? NCC, Marketing Carnival. And you know what? Tobago was nowhere up there to market Tobago Carnival. Are you serious? Well, I talk for Tobago. Well, they didn't send me, but I love Tobago, so I talked for Tobago. And that is why you need people who would serve Tobago in and out of office. I don't need no taxpayer paying for me to go and market Tobago, because I love my island. Some of these people, the first time they end up on a plane is when taxpayers' money start paying for them and never pay for themselves. And that is the reality. I don't need that. When you love something, you do it from the heart. Deputy Presiding Officer, let me turn to sport. I'll listen to you all for 3.5 hours, or they'll listen to me for 3.5 hours as well. Deputy Presiding Officer, it was the late great statesman Nelson Mandela who declared that Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. I'm a product of sport, so I understand it. I love it. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair. It is more powerful than governments in breaking down racial barriers. We see it all the time across the world. It laughs in the face of all types of discrimination. That is the power of sport. However, Deputy Presiding Officer, I've looked far, wide, up and down in this document, and there's nothing that gives me any hope that this administration understands the power of sport. Deputy Presiding Officer, you know, you played sport. I don't know if the member for Palliative Speyside knows, because I went to school with him, never seen him kick a line, I never even seen him throw a hoop. But yet he was on Facebook cussing sport people, telling them about how they're underperforming and all kind of thing. But what have you done for sport? What is your record? I understand that TFA can't even get $150,000 to run a league for hundreds of Tobagonian young sportsmen, footballers. But you know what? You just hear me talk about 2.4 million in marketing. The program alone for the chief secretary could have given them. But they can't even get $150,000 to run sport. We saw one group and the group caused the split. We saw the bacchanal that happened with that. They got, for about 30 of them, they got about $450,000. I've seen my coach over there, and he understands, because I'm sure you understand the pressure. My good friend from Lambo, that was my coach if all they didn't know. Right? He understands the trials and tribulations of sporting agencies. And you telling me where all they could find money to do all kind of nonsense, and you're hearing about the power of sports, and you wouldn't find and put away a good substantial figure to invest in our young people through sports? Deputy Presiding Officer, as a sport person, I will not watch sport go down the drain. So I wish to propose the following. We need to develop a clear Tobago sport policy to allow for sport for all. I remember there was one, and it needs to be, you need to dust it out and upgrade it. It was an all of community, utilizing sports in the community to build people, build communities, build athletes, and so you build an island. Reintroduce co-curricular activities at the secondary schools level, because whereas you have some PE in the primary schools, this is absent in the secondary schools. So we need to get that back into the school system, and we need to revitalize things like intercol. So when you have the secondary school football league, you're having participation from all age groups. You used to have first form, then you have under 14, then you have under 16, then you have under 19. That is how we used to build athletes. That is how Dwight York was birthed. That is how you had the Kevin Nelsons and those fellas. But what are you all doing? You tell me the last time you built 2 goalposts. Where the goalposts them there? Honorable, member of Palliative, goalposts them still there at Speyside? Huh? Where they there? Because you see, what Tobago is realizing more and more, some people just talk, but they can't walk the talk. And that is the reality. What we got from this administration is a lot of talk. And now when you have given them the opportunity to walk the talk, they're creeping, they're falling down. They just don't know how to do it. I want to also propose the implementation of sport gymnasium at every secondary school. When I was in college, I went to a school and they had world-class facilities, gyms. You're talking about where you can do fitness. So you can get weight training. because that is something that is woefully lacking among our athletes here. The access to do the other side of the development. So we might have the natural skills, but what about the conditioning? What about ensuring that they have the requisite meal support? In some instances, we can even have a sport-specific academy, because that is where most persons are moving to, where you identify the talent, you put them in a defined space, and you provide them with all the requisite support. So it's education. You have a strict training routine. You have a strict training meal plan. And so it's like an incubator, and you just keep producing world-class athletes. There's a science to professional development of athletes. It is a science. That is why physical education is a science. This BIVAPS thing wouldn't work anymore. Internationally recognized elite coaches. Coaching is important. Mandatory sport camps and the return of Village Olympics. Certified coaches within all schools. We have to have a fund specific and designated for athletes going to Trinidad that gives them all the requisite support, because oftentimes Tobagonians go down, there's no proper support. Sometimes you have to go 6 o'clock to play a match 10 o'clock. You're jet lag, you're tired, you're sleepy. How do you perform optimum? We have to treat with that. A clear maintenance plan and fund for facilities, because when you look at some of our facilities, imagine I had to get assistance from the assistant secretary to treat with a facility in my district when I had a competition. That should not be happening. Where is the continuous maintenance plan? A first-class facility for each sporting discipline. So I welcome the cricket, the notion of a cricket stadium. A unit dedicated to sport archives. This will assist with annual sport awards and promotion of athletes to international scouts. Mandatory global workshops for heads. A program to treat athletes returning home from college or retiring so that they can seamlessly be reintegrated into the society. One of the most important programs, and I hope the Secretary of Education is listening, reintroduction and emphasis on the SAT program, because this would allow our athletes to be able to have the requisite pre-qualification to enter US-based colleges, because when a scout comes, he wants to know that the students are ready, and you don't have to wait on a SAT score, which is a mandatory exam required for college students. Sport equipment grant to community sports club with 50 members and more, so that will help to build our sports clubs in the community. Increase opportunities for student athletes through the already established Lalon Gordon's Fund. Complete the much anticipated backlet, and I heard the Chief Secretary speak about that. And I say no more on sport except to say that we need to give sport its just due. All right. Coming to the end. Deputy Presiding Officer, I will now enlighten the Honorable House of this administration's great deception. On December 6, 2021, Tobagonians bought a dream like it was from Martin Luther King Jr., a dream which quickly became a nightmare like Freddy Krueger. Catchy buzzwords were thrown around: accountability, integrity, transparency, people first, bread and butter issues, mandate et al. Every Tobagonian dreams of a better Tobago, whatever that better looks or sounds like. Deputy Presiding Officer, the reality is, if I were to ask every member in this chamber, including your good self, what does your dream look like? I am sure there would be a myriad of different responses. Some members may prefer a house with 12 feet high walls and a swimming pool in a quiet community like Signal Hill. Another may prefer a mansion tucked in the hills of Mason Hall, while others may prefer a massive spread in first world countries like Canada. The point is, Deputy Presiding Officer, we all aspire and dream towards what is greater and better. In this regard, Deputy Presiding Officer, I cannot in good conscience fault Tobagonians for buying the dream of the greatest little island on the planet. I mean, that doesn't seem so far-fetched, does it? But the dream went further, Deputy Presiding Officer. Tobagonians were made to believe that once they elected the PDP, the Honorable Chief Secretary would create 1,000 jobs in mere months. The dream of ownership was made to sound as easy as 1, 2, 3. Roads would be free of potholes and as smooth as a baby's face. Tobago contractors will have nothing to fear, as they would have nothing to worry about, as they would continue to be included in the development of the island. Contracted officers of the THA believed in the dream of continued gainful employment, despite the change of administration. They even dreamed of being among those who would receive the ex gratia payment. Tobago at least dreamed of being among the first to use the indoor facility in Bacolet. They even dreamed of having the facility featured on the global stage for international games coming to the island. Alas, Deputy Presiding Officer, instead of living this dream, Tobagonians have been thrust into the middle of their worst nightmare. Instead of inclusion, we got victimization. Instead of job security, we got job termination. Instead of sustainable job creation, we got 10 days on and 10 days off. Instead of ex gratia, we got propaganda. Instead of sustainable housing, we got only one house, and they take away the poor keys from the woman. Instead of a brand new indoor sporting facility that we can all use year-round, we are getting a rushed beach sports facility next to the beach. Deputy Presiding Officer, let me be clear. It is my firm belief from the evidence and reports that I am bombarded with daily that this administration's problem transcends ineptitude, and it should be more aptly classified as malevolence. Deputy Presiding Officer, just like Tobagonians woke up one morning to hear the voices which appeared to sound like members of the current executive plotting to change the narrative and hire agents of propaganda providing them with lucrative paying jobs using taxpayers' money, Tobagonians, wake up and be ready to reclaim your island. Tobagonians, wake up and be ready to get rid of the most corrupt and vindictive administration you have ever witnessed. Tobagonians, I say, wake up and be ready to end the constant fetting, joyriding, and squandering of your THA funds. Tobagonians, wake up and be ready to rebuke this most inept and lawless group of political grasshoppers. Tobagonians, wake up. Tobagonians, wake up and rally to remove the first ever Chief Secretary under criminal investigation. Deputy Presiding Officer, and may I dare say Secretary of Education too, under criminal investigation. And may I dare say the entire executive under criminal investigation. That is the reality of Tobago at this time. We have an entire executive under criminal investigation. Deputy Presiding Officer, just like this current administration, Tobago is experiencing what I would refer to as an identity crisis. We cannot continue to coin ourselves as the greatest little island on the planet, while life becomes miserable for the majority of residents who calls this island home. The PDP turned independence, turned TPP, all this before midnight I had, promised to take us to the greatest little island status, whilst continuing to fail to provide even a vague roadmap how they're going to take us there. Deputy Presiding Officer, more importantly, as I examined the Secretary of Finance presentation on Monday, as I peel away the layers of fluff and pretty talk, I realized that we were presented with a budget statement that ultimately leaves more questions than it provides answers. Tobago wake up and look around. Who are we becoming? Tobago wake up and look around. Where is the island going? Tobago wake up. Who is really leading this place? Deputy Presiding Officer, as I continue to address the honorable members in this chamber, and by extension the people of Tobago and Trinidad, I feel confident that the thousands of employees of the Tobago House of Assembly, as well as the 200 employees who have been unceremoniously dismissed, are listening to me. Deputy Presiding Officer, as I stand here representing an organization that has led the THA for 21 consecutive years, during this time, the Assembly and by extension the island of Tobago has grown and developed tremendously. The PNM administration was able to achieve a great many things in education, in healthcare, in agriculture, in housing, in business development, in infrastructural development, in community development, in youth and sports, and in tourism and culture. Each and every achievement would not have been possible without the support and hard work of the staff of the Assembly over these years. So today, Deputy Presiding Officer, I want to personally and publicly salute all those. I want to repeat that. I want to publicly salute those who served as well as those who continue to serve with professionalism and a sense of patriotism and pride. I salute our hard-working public officers. Each and every PNM member who took the oath of office of allegiance in this very august chamber committed to do right to all manner of people without fear or favor, affection or ill will. Deputy Presiding Officer, I stand here without fear of contradiction that each and every PNM Assemblyman, Assistant Secretary, Secretary, Deputy Chief Secretary, and Chief Secretary strove in every moment of every day in office to uphold this sacred oath. Deputy Presiding Officer, I have always been an honest and forthright man, so I will not hesitate to admit that as an administration, unlike those on the other side, we accept our infabilities. The PNM made mistakes. Yes, we did. We were not perfect. As great as the PNM is, each day was not always a great day. Wasn't. So to the employees of the THA, whether in URP, CPEP, development, public service, contracted or daily rated workers, I, on behalf of the People's National Movement, offer our humblest apologies to all those who may have felt slighted or chastened by the earnest desire of the PNM to develop this island we all call home. We are big enough, we are man enough to say we are sorry. I stand here willing to own the mistakes and lessons learned from our actions. Deputy Presiding Officer, as the saying goes, show me a man or woman who has never made a mistake. And I can show you a man or woman who has never made anything at all. Deputy Presiding Officer, I am certain that in spite of any challenges employees of the THA may have had with previous PNM administrations, there was never a day that the workers had embedded in their collective psyche a legitimate fear that any moment their bread and butter could be snatched away because they dared to speak up. Never a day. Deputy Presiding Officer, there are members sitting in this house today who were candidates in the election in opposition. Members sitting right here, lost and went back to work the next day without victimization. That is the PNM's record. I could point. Members lost, get licks. They go back in the seat, sit down and do the work. Nobody was sent home. Nobody was labeled political hires. So despite the challenges with the PNM, I am certain there was never a day where Orville London, Kelvin Charles, or Ansel Dennis publicly threatened to fire employees of the THA for an opposing point of view. Never did anybody could truthfully say that they were publicly threatened. And I want to provide the record because I see the Prime Minister challenge a man, and I hope he will take up the challenge and put his position on the line. Put his position on the line for the sake of truth. Because on this side, notwithstanding the challenges, we believe in the truth. Deputy Presiding Officer, I'm confident that the technocrats who work with the Assembly the technocrats sitting in the chamber, they never felt as emasculated, disregarded, and disrespected as they do now under this administration. Deputy Presiding Officer, many employees of the THA have shared with me that this is the first time they feel like if they're sailing on a rudderless ship, which can sink at any moment. They are demoralized. They are afraid. They are scared. Some of them, they barely want to get up to come to work. Deputy Presiding Officer, I feel bold to say that given this gross ineptitude and vindictiveness of this administration, the workers of the THA today would prefer a bad day, imagine that, a bad day under the PNM than one of the rare good days under this Chief Secretary and his independent colleagues. They would prefer a bad day under the PNM. I like to tell you how disastrous the experiences with these people. Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm sure some, if you look sharp, some of the members right within here probably prefer to come back to the PNM than stay in this situation. And you all are welcome. You all are welcome. I'm putting that on public record. Those who resided in the house of the PNM, you are welcome to come home. Deputy Presiding Officer, I am confident that if THA employees, whether it's the multitudes who call or visit my office every week, or the ones sitting in a corner at this very moment grumbling, are given the opportunity to get rid of this bad-minded and dangerous administration, first thing on Monday morning, they'll all come out in their numbers. Deputy Presiding Officer, as I wind up my response to what has been described by one leading economist as a tall-tale budget with no links to data to represent the true state of Tobago's economy, I will be particularly negligent if I did not reference the Honorable Prime Minister's response to the Chief Secretary's statement at the 19th sitting of the House of the Assembly Legislature on Thursday, 22nd June 2023. Yesterday, the Honorable Prime Minister, in an address to the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, laid a comprehensive dossier of all the relevant documents supporting his statement of clarification and rebuttal in respect of the issue of the appointment of a chief administrator in the Tobago House of Assembly. The Honorable Prime Minister then gave the undertaking that he was prepared to resign forthwith if it could be truthfully shown by any of the authorities he mentioned, which included, of course, the Honorable Chief Secretary, that he misled the Parliament. Madam Deputy Presiding Officer, as the minority leader of all of Tobago, I call on the Honorable Chief Secretary to subject himself to the same standard, if only because we both took an oath to uphold the Constitution and the law. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Honorable Chief Secretary, as the Chief Executive Officer of the body corporate, the THA, is essentially responsible for setting the moral, ethical, and spiritual tone of the island. Deputy Presiding Officer, the PNM may not be perfect, but this administration is 1,000 times worse. I want to repeat that. The PNM, we may not be perfect, but I can say without fear of contradiction, this administration is 1,000 times worse, and that may be putting it mildly. Workers of the THA, I say to you, have no fear. Always ready to serve you. The PNM is right here. I thank you.
Members, the sitting is now suspended. We will break for lunch and will resume at 6 minutes past 2.
6 minutes past 2? Yeah.